Welcome to Astro Talk, today with a very special guest in England, Dr. Chris Mitchell. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Volker. It's lovely to be here.
And I'm very glad that it worked out that we could do this talk today. Now, today we will have, among other things, to talk about this book. And on the back of this book, it says Dr. Chris Mitchell has been a practicing astrologer since the late 1990s and specializes in traditional astrology. Because of that last sentence, we look at something here. Do you read German?
Nicht wirklich. Ich habe
Okay.
ein bisschen gelernt in der Schule.
Well, this is a very large Habilitationsschrift by Professor Dr. Stefan Heilen in Osnabrück, German University. It's
Mm.
called Hadriana Genitura, the astrological fragments of the Antigonos of Nicaea, translation and commentary. And on page 691, he talks about whole sign houses and how widespread it was in the old days. So it's not expensive, unusually. Well, it was not expensive. I see it's now very expensive. It seems. Oh, there's the paperback.
Mm.
Okay, the paperback is 40 euros, which is
Yeah,
very unusual for a scientific Habilitationsschrift. So for those people who viewing this video and can read German, I recommend to buy it. But first, we have to do this. Copyright. I have only the right to publish the respective conversation uncut and unedited on freely accessible video platforms, no paywalls, and on my homepages. My guest, Dr. Mitchell, has the right to shorten, edit, or add to the MP4 file, which I will send him via Swiss transfer as he wishes, and to publish it on his websites and video platforms according to his liking. So you can do whatever you like to do with the material. Is that okay with you?
absolutely. That's fine.
So let's get rid of that. We come back to the homepage later, but first, as it was written here, you have been a practicing astrologer since the late 1990s. When were you born? What year are you born?
1960, 15th of March, 1960.
So we are missing 40 years. So let's go back and start with where you were born. You were born in Bristol, is that right?
No, I was actually born in Windsor, near where the castle is, near London,
Okay.
which sounds very grand. But I was actually brought up in a new town called Bracknell, which was a rather drab concrete new town. But the nearest hospital happened to be Windsor. But it says Windsor on my passport, and that sounds a lot nicer than Bracknell.
Did you get an Eton education or a normal public education?
No, no, I went to the local primary school and then the local comprehensive school, so which I was very happy with.
And when did you finish your school training?
I left school in 1978 and then went to university in Bath, where I did mathematics with computing for 4 years. It was a sandwich course, so 2 years at the university, a year in industry working as a programmer, and a
Okay.
year back at university.
So we are now in 1982 when you had your bachelor.
That's right, yes. So I got my BSc in 1982.
So we are still missing 18 years. Okay. What happened then?
Well, I'd always been interested in the night sky. My mother, when I was a kid, used to take me out and point out constellations, so I got to know the basic ones, Orion, Cassiopeia, and so on. And I was always fascinated with ancient languages and symbols, even as a young child. And so astrology hit all the buttons, really. I mean, it's the night sky, it's a language, and it's lots of curious symbols. So that's what excited me about astrology. But I didn't get into studying it seriously until the 1990s.
Oh, so just a second. We are in 1982. What happened
Hmm.
then after your bachelor?
Well, I just got a job with British Rail for a few months. I always loved public transport and the idea of it. The job wasn't a particularly great one, programming computers, but I just wasn't kept busy at work, and so I soon left and found another job in Bath, which was much more convenient because I was living in Bristol at the time, and my British Rail job was a long way. It was in Reading, which is a good 150 kilometres, I suppose, from Bristol. Bath was a lot closer, and so I was just a computer programmer, and then I joined the National Health Service in 1983, 84, working as a computer programmer there. And really, I've still been doing a similar job ever since because my day job is still programming computers for the National Health Service.
What does that mean, programming computers for the National Health Service? Are you in a computer center doing this for nationwide purposes?
When I first started in the 1980s, yes, the local health authority was developing its own software rather unusually, rather than outsourcing it. And so it had a system that was deployed across the southwest of England. And I was involved in part of a large team developing this software, training it, training people in it, and deploying the software. But we then got privatized. The whole unit got privatized in 1994, and I didn't, none of a group of us didn't really want to work for a large American multinational. So we decided to set up our own little consultancy, thinking there'd be a year or two's work in it. And yep, today is actually the 31st birthday of the company that we set up, doing work for the National Health Service. And we still do. We're still actually programming 30-year-old computer systems that hospitals are now in the process of replacing.
So this company is a limited company, or is it a,
Yes.
so you are part of a limited company. Are you a part owner?
Yes, the four of us are all co-directors.
So you
So,
have 25% of the shares.
yes, yeah.
So how many people besides the owners are there working?
That's it. There's just four of us. So we're a tiny, tiny company, and we now only have two customers, and we're working on migrating these old computer systems to new ones. I mean, they're actually not that new. The ones they're migrating to are 25-year-old systems that have got lots of pretty front ends on. And then we're all coming up to retirement age, so I'm going to, after in a year or two, the company will wind down and we will all do our own separate pursuits. Mine
Oh,
being astrology, my colleague does Alexander technique, another one does swimming training, and so on.
so how many hours a day are you taking up by this job in this company advising the National Health Service and other clients? And then what, two clients, you said two clients, the National Health
Yes.
Service, and what's the other one?
Well, they're both hospitals within the National Health Service.
Oh,
It's
okay.
it's systems like patient admin. So when you go to hospital and you get booked in on a computer system, that's
Oh,
the
okay.
computer system that we're using. I would say it varies, but typically 15 to 20 hours a week. So it's not a full-time job. I mean,
Okay.
it pays the bills, but it's not really full-time.
Okay, and now the intriguing question, when did you get into astrology and what was your first astrology book or teacher or school?
My first astrology book was The Practical Astrologer by Nicholas Campion.
Oh,
And
great. I have it in German. Okay. Great, great.
and I bought this in the 1980s and I was interested in it, but I didn't really take it any further. But I had, by the 80s, got a bit obsessed with constellations and the zodiac. And if the Babylonians effectively invented the zodiac and they were obsessed with the number 12, surely they would have divided the ecliptic into 12 equal segments of 30 degrees each. So why is it that Pisces, which is supposed to be two symmetric fishes and therefore looks a bit like that, why does it have an enormous loop on one of the tails, making Pisces 40 degrees, whereas Aquarius, which I always think looks like a headless human, is only 20 degrees? And I got a bit obsessed with this. And in the mid 90s, when the internet was quite new, I posted on a news group asking somebody about this, and they said, "Oh, you need to talk to a man called Nicholas Campion because he edits something called Culture and Cosmos." And I thought, I know that name, I've got his book. And to my astonishment, it turned out that Nick lived about a kilometre away from me, just round the corner. So
You were living in Bristol.
I was living in Bristol at the time,
And
yes.
where was he living?
He was living in Bristol as well. We
Oh,
just
okay.
lived in slightly
So,
different parts of Bristol.
so that gives me a chance to show our viewers something a gem I discovered yesterday. Would you believe this? Now, we have a special site for our talk today, and the address is of the general site is astrologien.vonabisw.de. In English, that would be astrologies, and but this is the address astrologien.vonabisw.de. And there's a special site with our talk today. Now, we will come back to all this here, but this is very intriguing, and I will give you my gem on minute 41,
further.
41,
Thank you
and
so much, Francesca. I found that profound and really
can you hear it?
interesting. And I have
Yes, it's faint, but I can hear
no
it.
answer to your question, what kind of terminology might be best. I'd rather wish to show that the question gets at the same time a bit more complicated, but also more fascinating if we take into account the following detail, which is little known as far as I can see, but intriguing. I'm not going to tell you, the audience, that fact which you all know, that the terms astronomy and astrology were pretty interchangeable throughout antiquity and the medieval and early modern periods. But at the very beginning, there happened an interesting terminological change which directly affects the question that Francesca has raised at the beginning.
Francesca is Professor Francesca Roschberg. She's from America. I believe she's an archaeologist teacher.
Mhm.
And what this is about is what we all use, astronomy and astrology. And he found out,
Namely the following. We know that among the pre-Socratics, the term for what we call astronomy was astrologia. And that makes sense because it literally means signs of the stars. So why is it that astronomy came into play and replaced astrologia eventually? The answer is we first find astronomia among the Pythagoreans, and it was then adopted by Plato.
we can stop here. What I wanted to give the viewers, and probably you, because you might not have known this, Professor Heinlein found out that astrology is the original term for what we call today astronomy.
Mm.
And astronomy is what Plato invented as a neologismus, meaning an esoteric term. So this is very in my opinion, this is most amusing to consider the fact that every astronomer is a Platonist and every astrologer is not an astrologer but an astronomer.
Absolutely.
So
When
that
I
was
first
nice.
did my PhD, I thought I'd better start off by defining astronomy and astrology. So I went to the Oxford English Dictionary, which gives very full details of the etymology of every word and its earliest usage. And I think it was definition number one was astrology, the study of the skies and the way that planets and so on move. And astronomy was the influence that this has on human lives. And I
That's
thought,
exactly what
and I thought,
Professor
well, that's
Hein was.
crazy.
Yeah, that's what
But that
Heinlein was
was the
talking
it
about.
was the other way round.
Yeah,
Yes.
for the viewers, something to think about. Now, you read Professor Campion's book, and what happened with you and after that?
Well, after that, I did contact Nick because somebody said, get in touch with Nick Campion. Here's his email address, and he edits Culture and Cosmos. He might have some information. So I emailed him, got the relevant copy of Culture and Cosmos, and I happened to say, as you're in Bristol, do you happen to know if there are any astrology groups in Bristol? Because I'd like to actually start taking astrology more seriously and studying it. And he said there used to be a group, but I believe it shut down, and there's now a school, the Bristol School of Astrology. And it was just a fairly casual school, it's not an accredited one, and it was run out of the person that ran it was the manager of an old people's home in Bristol. And so she used the community room on a Saturday morning to do these classes. And so I joined that, and it was actually a very good school. It was a 4 year diploma course that I did there. I mean, it was ridiculously cheap compared to astrology schools these days,
Is it
um,
is it
and
the
had a really wide range.
astrologers school?
No, no, it doesn't exist anymore. It was called the Bristol School of Astrology, and I ended up teaching there as well and doing their website for them. And so this
Okay.
was, but I started teaching there, I think in 98, 99, something like that.
Okay, now we shall go to our special site because now I am intrigued about some questions with what you just said. Okay, this is where it starts. There is the Facebook link. There is the link to this publishing company which you own, I believe.
Yes, when I wrote my book, I didn't want to go through a conventional publisher, so I just created an imprint. So
Okay.
that's my company.
Here's the first Astra project workshop, and we were taking the last session debating question with Professor Hyland.
Mhm.
We come back to to the problem: what is a proper astrologer, um, uh, and astrology as divination, and all that. We come back to that later. Then here is a very nice YouTube. Uh,
The bit that isn't in Latin,
I
it's
take
sometimes
off
over
the
100 km.
sound. This is done for a special group, the Aquarius 7. How do you know these people?
That's another interesting one, actually, because when I started learning astrology in Bristol, I thought, well, there aren't any astrology groups here. There's just an astrology school. And I bumped into a friend of mine who said, oh, I used to go to university with an astrologer called Graham Boston, and he runs an astrology group in Cheltenham. Now, Cheltenham is about 70, 80 kilometres north of Bristol. It was quite an easy drive. And it turned out they had a thriving local astrology group that had been going well, since the early 80s, I believe, might even be older. It's a very long established group, and they still meet. They meet online now rather than in person. But it was effectively my local group. I later did get involved in setting up a group myself in Bristol with some other people. But Aquarius 7 was my local group, and I'm very involved in local groups because I'm on the board of the Astrological Association, so I'm their local groups coordinator. We have quite a thriving local group scene in the UK, and so lots of local groups hold meetings on a regular basis.
And we have a second video, which is this one. And it's again for the Aquarius 7. So I recommend both videos to watch. They're both, the first one is about William Lilly and interesting background information. And now we come to this. The diploma in medieval astrology in astrologos since 1990. Now, you mentioned that you did an education in Bristol with
Mhm.
a local school. Did you know when you did that this existed, or did you get to know about astrologers later because they are doing something similar? They train people.
Yes, I did get involved in Astrologos because I did Bernadette Brady's medieval course with them, but that was
But
later
late
on.
that was later,
Mm.
right?
Indeed,
But
yeah.
when you did your training in Bristol with the first school, did you know about them or did you get the knowledge later?
I got it later. I knew nothing about astrology groups or other astrologers other than the people in our little school. So I just knew a handful of people. I didn't even know any other astrologers.
Now you are on the board of the Astrological Association of Great Britain and on another board we come later to. If you compare what you learned in the first Bristol school you got your diploma, and you compare it with modern schools of astrology, whatever you want to like, what school would be the most premium school today in Great Britain teaching astrology?
I would say it's probably the Faculty of Astrological Studies if you want a general astrology knowledge in modern astrology. If you want to do traditional astrology, then things like the School of Traditional Astrology run by Deborah Holding is excellent. But for a general one, I would say the faculty is probably the leading school for general astrology.
And if you want to study psychological astrology, what school comes into your mind?
Well, I wouldn't say I'm an expert in psychological astrology, even though when I was learning astrology, all the schools had a very psychological focus to them. But I would say again, the faculty, a lot of psychological astrologers got their diploma from the Faculty of Astrological Studies.
When you were in this Bristol special school, a small school, did you hear about Liz Green?
Oh yes, I mean certainly knew about Liz Green. She was covered. I didn't. We weren't aware of what school she was running because she was running the CPA, I believe, at the time. And of course, I got to know Liz later on when I got involved with the Sophia Centre.
Okay, so you got your diploma. What would you say this diploma of your Bristol school, of what level is that diploma? Was that diploma?
Um, it's hard to say because I haven't done the faculty course. I've only done the Astrologos medieval course. Um, there's less focus. The Bristol School didn't really focus on having clients and giving readings to the same extent. The faculty, you have to have a proven track record where you actually submit various recordings and transcripts of sessions that you've had with people to show that you can be a good consulting astrologer. Although some of those skills were covered. I mean, the Bristol School of Astrology diploma didn't carry any weight. It wasn't official. It was just a school that a couple of astrologers had set up. I think it covered a lot of ground, and it was very good and very thorough. But it was never accredited. You could never join an organisation like the Professional Astrologers with this diploma because it didn't carry any weight. Whereas the Astrologos one that Bernadette Brady and Darren Gunsberg ran was accredited, and therefore that did carry a lot more weight. They were known as astrologers. Most people have never heard of the two astrologers that ran the Bristol School of Astrology, who were Liz Seddon and Roy McKinnon. They're not really famous astrologers in the community.
Now, you got your diploma in this Bristol school. You had it in your hands and you were reading it. You were satisfied that you did the hard work and you passed the exam. Was there a written and an oral exam, or how did that work?
Yes, there was a written exam. It was all in person in those days, of course, so people would actually physically come along to the class. I was teaching in the school shortly after that as well, so I was mixing with people. And of course, by this time, I had discovered the local group in Cheltenham, which is a big group at the time and had a lot of well-known astrologers in it as well. So I was definitely expanding my astrology circle at that point.
When you say you were expanding your astrology circle, you are still working for the computer business till today, with 15 to 20 hours a week. Um, how do I visualize that? Did you go to meetings? Did you attend conferences, or how did that get around?
Yes, I went. My first astrology conference was the Astrological Association one in Swansea in 2002.
Okay.
And that was a real eye opener because I was meeting a lot of really famous astrologers. All the astrologers whose books were on my shelf, they were there at that conference, and I ended up meeting a lot of them, and that was a real eye opener. And then I started going to the conferences regularly. I went to the AA one, I think it was in York the next year. And the year after that, it was in Bath Spa, which was very local to me. And that was the place that was hosting the Sophia Centre, and so I helped out with that, and that's when I got involved with the Astrological Association.
When you talk about Bath Spa in those years, in 2003, the Sophia Center was presenting itself to the world with the first public conference of the Sophia Center and the MA of Cultural Astronomy and Astrology. Were you
Mm.
involved in that conference?
I don't think I was involved in the 2003 one. I may have gone to it. I can't quite remember, but I got very involved after the AA conference was held on that campus.
Okay.
Obviously, I met Nick in person, and um, we discussed the MA. And a few years later, a couple of years later, I signed up to the MA and did the MA in Bath.
Okay, now let's take smaller steps because that's very intriguing. So let's put it this way. After the inaugural conference of 2003, you got involved with Nick Campion. Do you remember the details of that, getting involved with him?
Well, he would come along to AA conferences because he's vice president of the Astrological Association. So I met him there, and because I was interested in the Sophia Centre, I went along to any events that they had, and I was in touch with a lot of people that were doing it. And I think it was 2006 I actually started the MA there. So I was
So
in a
wait a minute. That's very intriguing. You started in 2006. In those days, it was still in Bath Spa University.
yes.
And you finished your MA in 2008, and there was no longer a master in Bath Spa University, but instead it had moved to Lampeter University, Trinity, St. David in Wales.
Yes.
Have you seen, heard, watched what happened, why this thing went from one place to another?
Yes, the reason that it started in Bath Spa was because I don't know the name of the body, but somebody had left a large sum of money to the astrological community to promote astrological education in an academic context.
That would be the Sophia Trust.
That's right. And the
And
Sophie,
according to my talk with Nick Campion, it was donated £1 million.
I believe so,
Yeah.
yes. And so that was enough to say, well, look, we will take this shed that you've got on campus, pay for it to be converted into a proper classroom and a class setting, if you let us run a course here, which they did. But I believe that the agreement was that that course would only run for that there would be a trial period of 5 years, and they would assess it after that. And I don't know what exactly went on, but because there were plenty of other courses at Bath Spa that didn't have nearly as many students wanting to do it as our course, but for some reason they decided that they didn't want our course. Whether this was an academic objection to the dreaded astrology word in the name of a title of a course, I don't know. I suspect it may have been. And I believe that I was the last student to graduate because I actually started in February rather than October. So the university had to keep it running until I'd actually submitted my dissertation.
What was the title?
Of my dissertation,
Yeah, MA dissertation.
it was whether the fact that the Babylonians divided the year into 12 months led to the development of a 12 sign zodiac.
Oh, okay. Now, going back to our special site, when you finished your MA, what happened then?
I was interested in doing a PhD and thought about it for a little while. And eventually, after about a year or so, I think 2 years, I gave it a bit of a break after the dissertation from academia. And I said to Nick, yes, I would like to do a PhD. And by this time, the Sophia Centre had moved to Lampeter, but the course is online rather than all the teaching was done online via Zoom rather than being face to face. And it was an incredible experience being face to face in Bath. You know, I would sit down at a table and there was Nick Campion teaching, there was Liz Green teaching, there were Bernadette Brady as a fellow student, and Judy Hall, and all these people whose books I had. I was sitting in the same class as them. And I did think a PhD is going to be quite a long journey. And I wasn't sure if I really wanted to do it online because it's a lot of commitment and you don't get much face to face contact. And Nick said to me, I can't take on any more PhD students this year. I'm full up. But as you're moving to Leicester, because by this stage I decided I was moving to Leicester from
Why,
Bristol.
why, why did you move?
My partner lives in Leicester. We'd had a little rather long distance relationship with me going up to
Uh,
Leicester quite often, and my job's very mobile because we don't have an office. So I can work anywhere, and my partner at the time worked for the university. He's retired now, but he worked for the university in Leicester, so his job wasn't at all mobile, but mine was. So and Nick said, well, look, if you're moving up to Leicester, why don't you see if the University of Leicester can offer a PhD. And I thought, well, you can't just knock on the door of a university and say, can I do a PhD? But it turned out that, well, as I moved to Leicester, my partner Phil said, look, there's a whole series of talks in the local museum on the space age. And most of them, of course, were by astrophysicists, because that's the specialist area of the university. But in the middle, there was a talk by a local historian who taught at the university called The Medieval Cosmos and Zodiac Men. So I emailed this person, Richard Jones, and said, "Oh, I'm coming to your talk. I'm really looking forward to this, and I'd also like to discuss PhD opportunities with you." And he emailed straight back and said, "Oh no, don't come to my talk. I can assure you it'll be a triumph of presentation over content because you probably know more about it than I do." But he was actually being very modest. He was very well informed, and we spent a good hour or two going over various PhD ideas. And he said, "Oh, you won't want me as a supervisor. I'm an archaeologist and I don't know enough about it." And I thought, actually, I think I do want you as a supervisor. Nick agreed to be a second supervisor, and so the rest is history. Richard became my supervisor, and I did my PhD at Leicester.
Not so fast. It's one thing to discuss a PhD, but then you have to come up with a title or a theme. And in your dissertation, okay, we will come back. This is the printed version of your dissertation,
Yes.
and this is the book which came out of your dissertation. We come back to the dissertation in a minute. I read in your dissertation, which is rather intriguing to read for the viewers if they are interested in academic aspects of this book, the first English astrology book. The dissertation to read is fun. But it said there that somebody else was important for you to find your theme, and it wasn't Jones, right?
No, it all started when, because by this time I thought I'd done Bernadette Brady's Astrologos course in medieval astrology.
And
I
now
did
let's now let's now let's talk about that first.
Yeah, I did that before I did the MA, in fact.
How did that come about?
When I decided to do the MA, I thought, I know the history is quite a big focus in the MA, or it was at the time, it was a compulsory module. And I thought, I don't know anything about the history of astrology. And medieval astrology, for example, seems a bit boring. I mean, it's only got 7 planets and 5 aspects. What can you do with that? And I thought I ought to find out something about this. And Bernadette Brady was somebody I knew and I'd seen anyway at conferences, and I really admired her work. And she was doing she had an Astrologos course on medieval astrology, and I thought, well, I'm going to sign up for this course because that will give me a good background in the sort of astrology that they did historically. And
Did she tell you about her enterprise on the conferences, or how did you find out that she had something else besides visiting conferences?
Oh, well, I've been going to AA conferences a lot since then. She was a regular speaker at Astrological Association conferences, so I knew her to speak to, and I can't remember if she had moved to England at that time. I think she must have done
She
because
comes from Australia
yeah,
originally. Yeah.
but they moved. She and Darrell moved to Bristol, so they were
Okay.
local as well. In fact, so
And they founded their Astrologos company in Bristol?
I think Astrologos was founded in Australia, and I think they
Oh,
might even have still been in Australia when I started. I That was about 2006, so I can't quite remember when
okay.
they moved there. I think Bernadette may have moved over to the UK to do the MA, but I'm not
Okay.
quite sure. I
And
can't
this
quite
this
remember.
course this course in medieval astrology, can you elaborate what you learned, and can you tell us why you didn't do the Robert Zoller course, which is more information than the Astrologos course?
The Robert Zoller course was primarily Hellenistic, and medieval astrology, I think, is
Oh,
richer.
wait a minute. The Zoller course is Bonatti, which is medieval.
Oh, sorry, the Zoller course is Bonatti.
Yeah.
Right, right. Yeah.
So
Um,
you could have taken the Zoller course to learn
mhm,
medieval astrology, but you decided against it. Was it the money, or was it the volume you have to do for getting the diploma? It's a rather long and intensive course, and it's divided in 2 parts, certificate and diploma. Some people have done it. Benjamin Dykes is one of them.
mm,
You didn't want to do Zoller. Do you remember, was that by chance that you liked Bernadette Brady because of the conferences, and Robert
mm.
Zoller was never there, so you couldn't talk to him, and he was ill at the time as well? How about this decision making? I do not Zoller, I do Brady.
I knew Bernadette from the conferences. I really liked her approach. I knew she was a great speaker and put concepts over very well. So I just thought this is somebody that I want to teach with. It was a question of the teacher
Yeah, okay.
rather than the content. But I think
Did,
the content was extremely good.
did you ever meet Robert Zoller later?
No, no, I
Right.
met Robert Hand, but I never met Robert Schmidt or Robert Zoller.
Okay, so back to your medieval astrology course with Bernadette Brady. What was she teaching? Was she teaching Ibn Ezra? Was she teaching Abu Mashar? Or was she teaching all of them? How did that go?
Remember at this stage there were a lot of translations of these medieval texts weren't available. So the main course book there was the Liber Hermeticum, um, which there was a fairly cheap translation of that available, not a very thorough one, but that was about
Is
it.
that the one which was originally goes back to Gundel, Liber
Yes,
Hermeticum?
I'm just having a look actually. It's on my, I'll show you the book, the two books. So there's Liber Hermeticum.
Yeah, that
So
looks like Gundel, and in German it's original. It was a translation. It was an addition of Gundel, and somebody must have translated it.
so it's
Speaker.
published by Spiker in Australia. So that was
Ah, okay,
obviously Bernadette had connections with that company.
okay.
And the other one was this was Ben
Bonati.
Dykes,
Okay, yeah, okay.
and Ben Dykes hadn't. So that was translated by Zoller and Hand, but Ben Dykes hadn't produced his translation of Bonati when I started.
Yes, yes, okay. So,
So I bought that subsequently.
so that is what you learned there. And
Yeah.
how did you finish the course? Were you impressed? Were you enthusiastic? Were you uh, not really my cup of tea? What was your impression?
Oh, I was completely hooked once I started doing the course and realized how rich medieval astrology was.
Okay,
And it's focused because Bernadette's course was natal and predictive. There's no horary in the course.
okay.
Um, and the Hellenistic tradition isn't really, apart from being touched on, isn't focused on. It really is focused mostly around Bonati and those techniques. So I would say my speciality is medieval astrology rather than traditional astrology.
Okay. And you finished that course and you did your MA. When did you start seeing clients?
Oh, I'd been seeing clients shortly after well, in the early 2000s. So before I did the MA, before I did Bernadette's course, but that was just seeing clients using modern astrology and
The the
doing
the,
that.
Brist, the Bristol School of Astrology
Yes,
was the
yeah.
basic for that. And did that change in your approach of seeing clients?
Yes, after I did the medieval course, I was still doing modern astrology, but I incorporated various medieval techniques into into it. And also, of course, the main focus, I always see the difference between medieval and modern astrology is modern astrology assigns personalities to signs. So if you see somebody with a lot of planets in Aquarius, you think this person may be unconventional because they've got a stellium in Aquarius. Whereas medieval astrology, signs don't have keywords, they don't have personalities, the planets have the personalities, and they're just happier in some places than others. And that shift of focus, which then leads on to essential dignity and things like that, is the main difference, I think, between modern and medieval.
I think it's a little bit difficult if I take your approach, Bristol School of Astrology, which is more or less a modern thing, like the
Mm.
faculty thing, just not accredited. And then you go into the medieval course, and then you try to combine these two paradigms, which are not really compatible with each other. Would you agree?
No, I think it's just an extra set of tools. You can use modern astrology and still use
Okay, now
affections, for
let's get
example.
into the nitty-gritty. Okay, do you use sects in your approach advising clients?
I do. I should point out that I don't see many clients now. Once I moved to Leicester,
Well, I'm sufficient with one. You see one client, and now let's get into the nitty-gritty.
right,
Okay,
okay.
okay. You use sects, okay. How about Firdaria?
I do use Fedaria and I
Okay,
use Mhm.
we don't, if we go into the details of what I'm asking now, we are talking in 8 hours and still not finished. Uh, how about zodiacal releasing?
No. I think that's more a Hellenistic technique, really.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true. It's Hellenistic, it's Vetus Valens. Um, and how do you do the dignities? The dignities in the traditional of medieval astrology is a very elaborate system. And there's a lot there, which is a little bit tricky if you want to do modern astrology with a dignity approach. So you must have found a way to integrate these two.
Yes, I think the way that I integrate it is I don't use modern planets for rulerships.
Okay.
So I do essential dignities the standard way. I used to, because solar fire is quite clever and it's got lots of editing that you can do for dignities and so on. You can use all of Ibn Ezra's various Almutans. I didn't actually find them terribly useful. I now stick to doing essential dignity and some accidental dignity, and the scoring system I use is Dorothean triplicities and Egyptian terms. So I can look at that and say, okay, Mars in Pisces is actually quite strong in your chart because it's in its own terms and it's in its own triplicities in your particular chart. So don't modern astrology will often say, "Oh, Mars in Pisces, we've got a warrior bogged down in a marsh here. It's not going to, it's not compatible." But actually, Mars in Pisces can be quite interesting. And I found that I had a lot of clients when I was just doing modern astrology thinking their Mars actually seems quite strong, and it doesn't make any sense because Mars in Pisces doesn't seem to work very well in modern astrology, but it does when you add the medieval techniques in. But what I then do is say, okay, now I've done this chart, and I always start off just with the 7 planets and 5 aspects and nothing else. And then say, now I've delineated it and I've got the main picture. Now I will add in the extras. I will add in the outer planets. I will add in Chiron and see what they
Okay,
bring to
okay.
the party.
Okay, final technology which was still used by Bonatti is the Dodecatemoria. In English, it's the 12 parts. It's originally going back to Manilius and Firmicus Maternus, but Bonatti was
Mm,
saying you need to do that. In my personal chart, I have the ascendant on 342 in Sagittarius, and the Dodecatemoria is Capricorn.
Capricorn.
So I have an ascendant which is Sagittarius combining Capricorn. Do you do that or don't you use the Dodecatemoria?
I haven't used them in readings. Of course, once I started writing my book and doing the thesis where Roger says, oh, you need to use these, you need to use
Yes.
novenes and so on. Interestingly, he doesn't ever mention them again, having introduced them. Uh,
Okay.
I have got more interested in them, but I haven't used them in client readings.
Well, in my case, I need to know that I'm a Capricorn ascendant as well as Sagittarius because it explains my personality better than only. Okay, now let's come back to this. Okay, this is heavy. And I have a lot of questions to your dissertation. It's called Roger of Hereford's Judicial Astrology, England's first astrology book. We are not talking about this, we are talking about this later. We are
That's
talking
right.
about the dissertation thesis submitted for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy at the University of Leicester, Chris Mitchell, Center for English Local History University, November 2019. When did you start the dissertation?
2012.
So that's a long time. And can you elaborate why it was so long? It was part-time, you had this other job. What
It was
was,
part-time.
and
So
you had a lot of problems with the manuscripts.
yes, it was. I had a lot of things to do to be able to start doing it. It started off because Bernadette Brady collared me at a conference and said, "I've found this amazing MPhil dissertation that somebody wrote in 1991 by Nicholas White,
Yes.
and he's not an astrologer; he's a historian of science, and he found this manuscript with a chart in it, and he thinks that the chart is that of Eleanor of Aquitaine." Um, and he said, but he didn't really read the whole manuscript, but he did just summarize it and say, oh, Roger uses a particularly strange technique that seems to be of his own devising. Now, Bernadette's take was having read Nicholas White's MPhil was this guy's not an astrologer. He hasn't translated the whole thing, but he has spotted that Roger's using some techniques that I've never seen before, and they might be unique. There might be a unique English astrology here that was taking place in Hereford that wasn't really didn't make it into the main corpus. And she said, "You need to learn Latin, translate these manuscripts, and get it out there to astrologers." That was her exact words.
She said you need to learn Latin. You didn't speak Latin in those days?
No, they didn't do Latin at my school. They'd stopped that a year before I started.
That sounds rather strong work. If I imagine in the age we are talking about, you were born 1960, to learn Latin and to learn the medieval Latin, which is not the same cup of tea, and to read manuscripts which are somewhat scribbled and difficult to read. How long did it take you from 2012 till you were able to read the Latin?
Oh, a good couple of years. Medieval Latin is easier than classical Latin, and because it was mostly English or Northern European, well, Roger's work, of course, was English, and other texts were tended to be English or Northern European. They tended to have a fairly Anglo-Saxon grammatical structure, like we have in modern day English. It's not like reading Cicero, where the verb is, 15 sentences later on. It's like, well, where's the verb? It must be in here somewhere. It's it's much simpler in the sense that it's quite formulaic. If Saturn is in the third house, then, so
Okay.
it's not as difficult as classical Latin. So I started learning, I went on an intensive paleography course at Keele University in 2011 before I started the PhD to get to grips with some of the paleography so I could read manuscripts. And then I went on another intensive course at Keele University to learn Latin.
Where's this university? Kale?
Keele, it's a
Kiel.
small university in the northwest of England,
Oh,
and they do a summer school there for Latin and one for
that's a,
paleography.
that sounds like long distance.
Well, it was in person, but yeah, from where I am in Leicester, it's not that far. It's
Oh, okay.
yeah, I don't know, 150 kilometers maybe, not very far. And
Okay, now let's get a little bit into the dissertation. In your dissertation, you were talking about all the manuscripts, but you talk a little bit of the author of the manuscripts, which is Roger of Hereford. Do you call
mm,
it Hereford or Hereford, or how do you pronounce it?
Hereford.
Hereford. Where
Mm.
is Hereford, and what is the school of Hereford, and what is the cathedral of Hereford? All about that before you continue.
Hereford is on the English-Welsh border in the English Midlands. Um, And Hereford, before the days of universities, after this Arabic learning came into Europe, the cathedral school at Hereford was probably the prime cathedral school for learning natural sciences. So computus, later on astrology, but astronomy as
How
well.
about the
So
school of Canterbury Cathedral?
well, that kept varying because at times it was Hereford was a secular cathedral, and secular doesn't mean we don't believe in God. It means it didn't have clergy doing the teaching. It was lay teachers, and they were focusing rather than on theology. They were focusing on things like the natural sciences. Canterbury sometimes was a secular school and sometimes wasn't, but it didn't really have a major scientific focus, as far as I'm aware. The major one and the one that was being sponsored by King Henry I of England was the Cathedral School in Hereford,
Would you
and
say, would you
renowned
say,
at the time.
would you say Hereford is the Oxford of those days?
Yes, in those days it was the Oxford. And so, for example, Robert Grosseteste, who taught at Oxford in the early 1200s, had been at Hereford and he'd been working there as well. Roger of Hereford may have met him. It's all a bit vague who Roger's students and proteges were, but it was one of the key things. People were invited to come over to Hereford to teach. The local bishop was very supportive of it. And in fact, Hereford Cathedral tell this lovely story, which is before Roger of Hereford, about 100 years before. The Bishop of Hereford had a copy of Firmicus Maternicis Mathesis, and it was frustrating for astrologers in the 11th century because they couldn't do chart calculation. They had a textbook saying if you've got Mercury in the third house, you'll be a great astrologer. But nobody could work out if they had Mercury in the third house because they couldn't do chart calculation. But he was
They didn't have tables and ephemeris.
They didn't. No, they'd lost the skill in Western Europe at any rate. The
Yes.
Arabs knew how to do it, the Greeks knew how to do it, the Romans knew how to do it, but Anglo-Saxon and later early Norman scholars didn't. So
And the Arabs didn't know how to do it.
indeed, yes, yeah, that's how we can do astrology today because that information came in from the Arabic world in the 12th century. But a hundred years,
Would you say that this fact that we would not be able to do a lot of things with not having the Arab culture being transferred into Western Latin is something which our today's leaders don't like so much because they don't talk about it.
Well, that's a very good point, actually. I mean, remember, it was there was a lot of hostility between Christianity and Islam in the 11th and 12th century. You had the Crusades starting, Spain was contested territory, but they did see this Arabic knowledge not as Islamic, but as ancient knowledge that the Arabs had preserved. So it was
Okay,
kind of
I agree.
exempt in
I
that sense.
agree for the people in 1200 or 1170 when
Hmm.
Roger of Hereford was writing his book. But we are in September of 2025. What is your explanation that we Western people are so extremely arrogant that we deny this history?
I know it's quite extraordinary, isn't it? We do the same with the Babylonians as well.
Yes, yes, we do. Yes,
So David Pingree wrote a classic paper on this called Hellenophilia, which is, oh, the Greeks invented everything and nothing else is important.
which is a lie.
Of course.
Yeah. So you don't have an explanation why our leaders of today are not using this knowledge to build a bridge to the Arab countries.
No, it would be good if they did. Although it is interesting that um, even some Arabs, like when I was learning a little bit of Arabic at the university, my teacher, the Arabic teacher there, asked me what I was doing and why I was learning Arabic, and I told her and said, "Oh, I'm because I need to have a look at some manuscripts, and I occasionally need to go back to the Arabic original and see was this translation into Latin uh, what I'm thinking of." And she said, "Yes, it's very sad, isn't it?" And I said, "What? It's very sad that I'm looking at Arabic manuscripts." And she said, "No," she said, "I'm an Arab, and I just think it's very sad that the last useful thing we did was 1,000 years ago." And I thought that was a little extreme because it's like, well,
Oh,
there's
okay.
plenty of other things that have gone on in the
Yeah.
meantime. But
Okay. Um, we know a little bit about the importance of the Cathedral of Hereford and the school located in the cathedral.
mm,
Is my impression right? We know basically nothing about Roger of Hereford, or do you have something to offer?
oh well, I do now. At the time when I did my PhD, I said Roger's a shadowy character. We don't know anything about him. We don't know whether he when he was born, whether he had children, whether he went to Toledo. And after I'd submitted it, I got an email from an American professor who claimed to be a direct descendant of Roger of Hereford. And I thought, oh, here we go. But he sent me a copy of Burke's Landed Gentry, which is from the Victorian edition of it, that showed the family tree basically going from Roger of Hereford allegedly down to uh, somebody in Victorian times. And I then used ancestry.com to take that a bit further and thought, oh, okay, there's somebody called Robert Hereford who was still alive recently. And then I found an obituary for Robert Bobby Hereford, who lived in Mordiford near Hereford. A local scholar had claimed that the family were still living there, and the obituary said the family had been on this estate since Norman times. And eventually, about 3 years ago, I tracked down the a chap who lives there now and owns it. He's 85 years old, and he is the great 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 etc. grandson. He showed me around his stately home in Mordiford, which was very nice. He's got two sons himself. One of them, Mark Hereford, is lives in Los Angeles, and he's a film. He was in The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. He works in the film industry, and he's got a daughter, Mia. So we still have Roger of Hereford's line here to this day. And yes, Major James Hereford, who was the person I met, I gave him a copy of my thesis and the book, and he was quite excited because he said, "Well, we'd heard of Roger of Hereford," and he pointed on the family tree and said, "We thought it was that one." It was like, "No, no, it's that one that was the Roger of Hereford." So that filled in some gaps for him as well. So it's lovely that there's still that connection going down to the current day.
Back to your thesis. Next sentence I wanted to ask you. I am indebted to authors too numerous to mention, although I shall single out Dr. Benjamin Dykes. Why?
Benjamin Dykes really fired up my interest more in medieval astrology after I'd done the diploma. He had translated the Bonatti book by then. And while I was doing my PhD, there were a couple of things that made absolutely no sense to me. Um, and I asked Ben at various conferences, what do you make of this? I just don't understand this particular passage. And of course, his Latin is a lot better than mine, and he was able to explain, yeah, actually, this is what this particular passage means. And one of them in particular was a passage where uh, a uh, you can find a hidden thing, and it just didn't make any sense to me. It's like if the question is asked in the third half part of the hour of the sun, then the object might be twisting white wool, and that sorry, the question is about warfare or something, but the hidden thing is a piece of twisted white wool or a bat's head, and it's like, well, this is absolute nonsense. What on earth does it mean? And that's when Ben said, "Ah, yeah, yeah, this is what they call a tester." The hidden thing is somebody comes and asks you a question and they've got a lucky charm on them or something about them. And if they ask a question, and if I don't even bother answering the question, but I say, yes, I think you've got a mole on your left arm, I couldn't possibly know that. But if you have got a mole on your left arm, and just by the fact that you've arrived at this time, I know that, that proves that I must be a really good astrologer. And this, therefore, was a way of testing the astrologer, or the astrologer could impress his client by saying, yes, I think you've got a lucky charm that's maybe a bat's head in your pocket. And if they say, well, actually, I have, how on earth did you know that? That means that the client's going to think, yes, this astrologer knows his stuff. So it was little things like that. And also, Ben gave me a copy of a PDF of his book, The Search of the Heart by
Oh, okay.
Corinthia.
Now
So,
it's in print.
so very generous of him. Yeah, but it's in print now. So I had a copy of that he gave me.
On page 5, Abu Mashar is cited frequently, and his major work, Great Introduction to the Science of the Stars, was translated into Latin in the 12th century. One translation was done by John of Sevilla, the other by Hermann of Corinthia, and these two translations are quite different. Is it too much to ask to do a short information how much they are different?
Very different. John of Seville was very precise about translating the Arabic word for word. Herman's version is much shorter because he understood what Abu Mashar was saying and then paraphrased it. So John would translate every single passage, and it might be a very Arabic tends to be quite long and involved, and John would do all of that. Herman of Corinthia would say, "This is what Abu Mashar is trying to tell us." It's almost an abbreviation in a way.
And then on page 10, it was not until the 13th century that astrology began to be disseminated to a wider audience with the production of manuscripts that can be considered astrological textbooks by the likes of Michael Scott and Guido Bonatti. Scott was a translator in astrology in the court of Frederick II and introduced the ideas of Averroes to the Latin West and wrote on astrology texts Liber Introductoris. Bonatti's legacy in particular has been long-lasting. Nicolaus Campion described him as the best-known astrologer of his time, indeed one of the most famous astrologers in European history. Would you agree that he was the last, in terms of Olivia Berkeley, real astrologer?
Well, William Lilly was owed a debt to Bonatti and often referred to Bonatti and was doing it. There were astrologers in the intervening period as well. So I don't know. I think that's open for debate.
Okay. I think I can stop taking your dissertation because people can download it. I don't have to go more on this. I only wanted to ask you something about this. In your book, in this one,
Mhm.
on page, let me see where that is. There's a footnote where you say where people can find it. And there it says https doi.org.
Mm.
And this DOI seems to be something special, and this is not a DOI address. Did this change and why?
Well, I'm not sure how they upload this. Every PhD thesis at Leicester gets the university put it on their website. DOI is, I don't even know what it stands for, but it's a standard academic reference for various papers. It's a way of saying that if papers move, they should keep the same DOI reference, but that's the university that allocate that. So I don't know the inner workings of that, to be
And
honest.
if you click on this university link which I showed before, you get to this dissertation, which is 322 pages, and this is it. In if you print it out on your printer. And now let's go to the next step, which is this book. When you were working on the dissertation, when did you decide I will do a complete translation of Roger of Hereford's judicial astrology texts? Was this from the beginning or did this come up later?
I did a complete translation during the PhD. I made sure, and I had to match up all of the manuscripts and make sure that there weren't differences in the text. There weren't. There were bits missing from some texts, but there was nothing. They were the same where they matched. They were the same words. Um, so I already had a translation. Now, I didn't want to put a full translation in the dissertation because then the examiner would focus on whether my Latin was perfect or not, rather than talking about the astrology. But the main reason is that I started doing the PhD because, as I say, Bernadette said to me, I've come across this amazing dissertation, and you've got to go out there and translate it and get it out there to astrologers. So when I submitted my dissertation, my thesis, I thought, well, I haven't really got it out there to astrologers. It's quite a difficult read. It's 300 odd pages long. Not many people are going to read it, maybe a handful of people. Astrologers who are
Me?
I think you might be the sixth person who read my thesis in that case, Volker. So I did. I thought, well, I really need to get this out there to astrologers and people that are doing astrology, understand astrology, especially traditional astrologers, might be interested in some of these odd techniques. And the trouble with writing a thesis is they're very, very boring to read. Every single sentence has to have a footnote to justify it.
Well, I disagree. Your dissertation is fun to read. You have a nice way of writing. It's not as dry as some other dissertations I've read.
Oh, it's very kind of you to say so. Thank you.
I really enjoyed reading it, and this is not normal for dissertations. Most dissertations are, as you say, dry and boring, but this is not.
Well, I'm very pleased to hear you say that. Thank you.
Well, that's my impression. I
Uh,
might be wrong, it's just personal.
but the book is a lot more accessible, and and it goes through the entire manuscript, and it translates all of it. So I'm just doing it paragraph by paragraph or sentence by sentence, saying this is what Roger says, and this is what the translation means, and then give lots of examples. There aren't many examples in the thesis because it's not an astrology book, whereas my book is. So, and also because I was encouraged to actually do a an academic translation, but I thought that's going to take a very long time, and academic books are really expensive, and people aren't going to read it. Whereas my book is £10 or €10 on Kindle, and 16.95 if you buy it in physical form. So it's affordable.
Yes, it is. And you decided to create a company to publish it. How much money did you have to invest in the whole project that this book was printed?
Well, to self-publish, it's not a company, it's just an imprint. You just need to buy a batch of ISBN numbers, which is about £100. The most expensive bit was I paid a graphic designer who I know £350 for the front cover. So setting it up, publishing it with Amazon, not very much at all. I didn't expect to make any money out of it, but over the few years that it's been published, I've made a profit of a couple of £1,000, so I was very happy with that.
Okay, one can have the opinion that this book is a handbook for horary astrology. Would you agree?
It is. It's basically Roger's text was a horary textbook, which is quite interesting because I didn't do any horary astrology on the Astrologos course. So I did do just the certificate course with Deb Holding. And on the first lesson, when she was going around saying, why do you want to learn about horary astrology? I said, well, I've just written a book on horary astrology, so I thought maybe I should learn something about it.
And how did she react?
She laughed. She knew what my project was, so
Ah,
I
okay.
know Deb really well, so that wasn't a problem.
Would you go as far as you could teach this book in a course,
I have.
and you have, and did the people who finished the course leave your course and were able to do hourly clientele delineating?
I don't know. I didn't really do a formal course, but I did do a short course with the Sophia Centre alumni where I actually used this and said, this is how Roger approaches it, because I think he's very modern in his approach. He's teaching a bunch of school kids. So he says, look, you read all these Arabic texts and they're really long-winded. And if you want to do something, you have to look up the question. And this is a ninth house question, so you do that. And he said, it's really simple. All they're doing is saying you, the client, the client is the ruler of the first house, and they're asking about something, everything, and he calls it res, the thing in Latin, relates to a house. Just find the ruler of that house and then see what's the relationship between those two planets. It's easy. And then he says, of course, it might be that that planet's in bad condition, so you can't do that. Well, don't worry. If you can't do that, try this. Well, if that doesn't work, try this. And then he describes duodenario or dodecamatoria, novenes, which is the Navamsa chart. Uh, but he doesn't go into detail. And then he says to his students, look, I've given you all these things. You must be getting confused by now because which one do I use? Well, actually, just use all of them and see which ones are backing it up most. If you get lots of votes, a testimony for one particular outcome, that's more likely than if you've only got a small number of testimonies for the others. So the way he's teaching it is the way a modern teacher would do it. And people appreciated it. Whether they went out and put it into practice or not, I don't know because I didn't follow up on that.
Well, in the English language, especially of Britain, we have this book, which is the first orrery manual, I would call it. Then we have the three books of William Lilly in the 17th century, and the
Mm,
second book is a manual on orrery astrology.
yeah.
And then in 1985, Olivia Barclay developed her course of orrery, and she published a book on orrery astrology.
Mm.
And later, Barbara Dunn, a pupil of Olivia Barclay, published her orrery book. And then we have some American people publishing orrery books. Did you ever compare for yourself, a personal opinion, how good is this one compared with these others?
I think the later ones are better because, from Roger's point of view, these techniques were all brand new. He's saying to his school kids, we got all these Latin translations now of some new texts that are coming in. I'm compiling them all into a single volume for you to make sense of it. We don't know for sure whether Roger had clients. If he did, they would have been very rich clients. He was part of the bishop's household, and chart calculation was horrifically complicated in the 12th century. It would have taken days to draw up a chart. By the time of William Lilly, he's using Kepler's ephemeris. It's much easier to draw up a chart. They have a printing press. It's easier to read more material, get it out there. So Lilly has an obvious understanding and he tells us about his clients. He tells us about the technique he uses. Roger is taking these techniques that he probably doesn't fully understand himself and saying, this is interesting stuff and you need to learn it. Whether he had clients, whether he practiced it himself, we don't really know. He may not have done. He may simply have been an academic saying, I've got all these texts, I've translated them, and I don't really know what to do with them. Just as Charles Burnet translated Abu Mashar, but Charles will say, well, I'm not an astrologer, but he knows how to translate an academic text. So I think William Lilly was much more of a practitioner and described himself as student of astrology. Roger didn't do that. He does say astrology is the greatest art because it gives you power over other people because you can see into the future, which is a strange thing to be saying in a Christian cathedral school, but you can imagine that that would grab the attention of a 13 or 14-year-old boy at the time.
So this book is more for people who want to know the history of England. It is the first English astrology book on orrery, but you would say if you want to practice it, take William Lilly, or would you say no, Lilly is 17th century, take the 21st century books? Which would Do you have a preference yourself? Do you do orally yourself?
Not for clients. I do try and practice it. I only got the certificate from the STA. I haven't taken it further to do the diploma. I may do at some stage, but I need a lot of practice before
The,
I
the
can offer
the
that.
certificate of what? The STA is this
Sorry, the
School of
School of Traditional Astrology.
from
That's
Deborah Holding.
Deborah Holdings. But I would say that that book does have one unique selling point. One of the things that Roger did, it starts off as a horary textbook, but then book two of his book is the Book of Intentions. And this is how do you know what your client really wants? So a client may have a perfectly good horary question. Will my father recover from this illness? And you think, well, okay, father, illness, these are all good horary things represented by houses. But of course, the client might really be thinking, when am I going to get my hands on dad's inheritance? Which is a very different question. So Roger's Book of Intentions is designed to tell you, to show you techniques to find out what does this person really want? What's in their mind? Because in the 12th century, without email and post and a printing press, if somebody asked a horary question, you only knew the question when the client knocked on your door. And you can't just do a consultation chart as you might do today, that's going to be totally different from the natal chart. The question they're asking you, that's the horary chart, but it's also the consultation chart. So you need different techniques to be able to think, okay, I'm going to see what's in really in their mind while I actually listen to the question. So his book of intentions tells you what the client really wants. And I don't think Lily does that. This is quite. Saul mentions it in one of his books, but only in passing. Roger seems to be the one that is focusing on this and is a bit intrigued by it, and I haven't seen that anywhere else. So I think that's what's lacking in modern astrology horary books and in Lily's books and on horary courses. So Roger's Book of Intentions is unique, I think, in that sense.
When I was researching Dodecatemoria, I found out that some contemporary astrologers of the 21st century take the chart of the Dodecatemoria for exactly that purpose.
Right. Well, that's they're using the technique that Roger propounded. He wasn't the first to do it. This was the other thing. Roger did not invent new
Yeah,
techniques. They
okay.
all had precedents in the Arabic literature. But when Nicholas Wright was doing his White was writing his MPhil in 1991, he didn't know that because those translations weren't available.
Did we cover your dissertation and your book, this one, your PhD and your book? Did we cover that sufficiently so we can change subject?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Um, it says here on the cover that you are a tutor on the MA Cultural Astronomy and Astrology of Sophia Center in today Lampeter, Wales. How did that come about?
Well, there seems to be this Nicholas Campion thread running throughout my life, doesn't there? From buying my first astrology book by him in 1983 or so, two or something, to the current day. So obviously, because I was working with Nick and involved in the Sophia Centre and involved in the AA and did the MA myself and did a PhD that Nick had an interest in. I was focusing on the history of astrology. That's definitely Nick's core subject as well, and or core passion. So I've been working very closely with Nick on that, and so I've been a tutor at the Sophia Centre at Lampeter for oh, I don't know how long now, quite a long time. So
What is a tutor?
we the entire course is done online. So with each term, you have live sessions with various modules. So I teach on the history module. It's now called the Astrology, History, Soul and Spirit. It's been merged with another module, but so we're starting next week. In fact, the new term starts then.
So you are
So
doing a lecture online?
yep, I do a lecture online and discussion with the students, and I mark their papers, and I have students that I supervise for dissertations as well.
Well, you're not teaching history of astrology since 5000 before Christ till today, right?
Pretty much, yeah. It
Oh, you
starts.
do? You
It's
do?
not just me. I mean, it's me, Nick, and Francis Kleins, and we start with and we had different lecturers. Like we had Dorian Greenbaum was doing the Hellenistic side of things. We start with Babylonian, move on to Hellenistic, medieval, Arabic, oh sorry, Arabic, medieval, and then Renaissance, and then right up until the modern day. And obviously,
Okay.
my specialist areas are somewhere in the middle of those.
How
But I
many
do
hour,
have a good
how many
teacher in the others as
hours
well.
during when the school is running? It's in semesters or trimesters? How do you organize it?
Yeah, it varies. It's usually 10 lectures. Oh, sorry, 10 sessions in the module, and they're 2 hours each once a week.
And how much time of your life do you need in preparing, doing the lecture, questions and follow up the questions, email, because it's online with a lot of email. How many hours of a week are taken up by that work?
The preparation takes quite a long time, but once you've got a particular module, it is valid for 2 or 3 years. I mean, I do tweak them year by year, but actually preparing those took a very long time. Answering questions is a bit easier. We have an online forum. Not everybody can attend in person. We have students in Australia where the timing is just completely impractical for them. So they watch the recording of the lecture, and questions and so on are usually done on a forum where it's not just uh, me, but other people can jump in and answer questions as well. Um, so it's not a huge amount of time for that. Supervision, obviously, of students takes up quite a lot of time.
What do you mean by supervision? What do you do there?
I've got students that are doing a particular dissertation on their MA, and I have monthly sessions with them for about an hour, and I have to prepare for those as well, where we go through, well, what have they done? Are they going in the right direction? Do they need guidance on something, and so on. So I've been supervi I normally only have one student at a time to supervise.
Would you qualify this tutoring in this MA a full-time job or a part-time job?
No, no, it's part time. I mean, in according to the handbook, the student gets, I think it's 25 hours of supervision over the course of the dissertation, and the dissertation, if they're doing it part time, can be 3 or 4 years. So,
Okay. Did we cover your tutoring sufficiently?
I think so. Yes, yeah.
Now you are in organizations as representative. You are on the board of the Astrological Association. How did that come about?
It came about in I think 2000 and, I think it was 2004 when the Astrological Association conference was held at Bath Spa, and I emailed Wendy on the Astrological Association and said, "Well, look, I live in Bristol. I'm only just down the road. Do you want a hand setting anything up? Is there any way I can help for the conference?" So, and there was. So I got very involved in that and helped out on the conference. And then afterwards, they contacted me and said, "Would you like to come on the council?" as it was at the time. And so I did, and was on there for some time. I took a break while I was doing my PhD. I didn't feel I could take on that and a day job and everything else. Um, so I was off the board for a while I was doing my PhD. But after that, the AA became a charity, so we now have a board rather than a council.
And I have an interview on my channel, which is this one, which this talk with Dr. Mitchell will be published. And there is an interview of me with Roy Gillette. So if you're interested how Roy Gillette became an astrologer, go to the channel. Uh, I'm sure you know him. Would you like to talk about him?
Sorry, who did you say?
Roy Gillette,
Oh, yes, yeah. Well, Roy has been president for longer than I've been a member of the AA. I mean, he has stood down this year,
yes, I know.
and but he's emeritus. He's an emeritus member of the board, and yeah, he's been really quite extraordinary because I mean, Roy was born in 1937, I believe.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and he's still incredibly active. I mean, he just went over to a wedding in Poland and drove over there and back again. I feel nervous driving for 2 hours these days, but Roy's in his late 80s and has
How
no
how
problem.
how
He's such a
important
live wire.
how important was he for the astrology in Great Britain?
I think extremely important. I think he's guided it. He's guided the association through a lot, and he's built a lot of bridges as well. Astrological organisations can tend to have disagreements with each other, but I think in the UK, all of the bodies that we've got representing astrology, the faculty, the lodge, the AA, and so on, all get on very well. There are people on the board of one are also on the board of others. So I think we have a really coherent astrological community in England, and a lot of that's thanks to Roy, who's very good at bringing people together, and also to Wendy Stacey, who has the big picture in terms of how to organise things. So when COVID hit, we had an online conference and got that together very, very quickly, and it was really successful. So I think we got an excellent board on the AA, and Roy's been a very integral part of that for decades.
And you are also on the board of the Association of Professional Astrologers International. Is that with this President Sharon Knight?
That's right, yes.
What's that?
It started off as the Association of Professional Astrologers and was just UK based, and then became they added the international bit later because they were getting a lot of interest from students, particularly in Turkey. Actually, there's quite a large Turkish contingent, and the idea is to promote professionalism in astrology because you see a lot of adverts for, oh, I'm an astrologer, I could do a reading and I charge this much, but is that astrologer any good or not? And the APAI has a list of schools that says, well, if you've got a diploma from this school, then we know that you've been through a proper rigorous course of astrological education, and therefore we're happy to say to put you up on the directory as a professional astrologer. So it weeds out the people that have read a few astrology books and think, I know, I'll become an astrologer and just do some readings, but all they're doing is pressing a button on Solar Fire to print out a transit report rather than being a serious
Or
astrologer.
nowadays, ask ChatGPT. It's amazing what they put out.
It is, and it can look quite authentic. The only trouble is,
To warn the viewers, I tried to
mm,
use this so-called intelligence, which is dumber than dumb, because they don't have ephemeris. So all they tell you is wrong because they give the wrong situation of planets. So never ask ChatGPT about astrology. But back to your organization, how many members?
the APAI, it's got about 150.
Okay, that correlates to how many astrologers in Great Britain?
I would say the bulk are probably in Great Britain, probably about 100 off the top of my head.
100 astrologers
Yeah,
only?
yeah, because a lot of professional astrologers don't join the APAI. And I always think it's a tricky one, isn't it? Because if you think about it, the vast majority of astrologers in the world, professional astrologers, are actually in India. And hardly any of them are members of the APAI. Why would they be?
Okay, how about freelance astrologer without any affiliation with any organization? How many astrologers does Great Britain have? Scotland, England, and Wales?
Uh, I really don't know. I mean,
If you had to speculate.
there's been such a surge of interest amongst younger people, well, for the last 20 years now, really, in
Yes.
astrology, that when you look at a popular magazine like Vogue and it will say, here are the 10 most famous astrologers in the UK, and I've never heard of any of them.
Okay. Now let's get back to this homepage, special site. I had I had Uranus crossing my ascendant when it was on 3 degrees 42 minutes. And a lot of people are telling the same story that then the impulse was created to take up astrology. It was the case with me. Would you agree on that, that Uranus crossing the ascendant could affect something like that?
That's a very good question. I tend to associate astrology with Mercury rather than Uranus. And I know in modern astrology, a lot of people think of Uranus as a higher dimension of Mercury. Not sure I really buy that one myself. Although Rob Hand once tried to persuade me to use whole sign. We were at a conference and I threw Leo 12 Uranus. And he said, and I said, oh, that's me. And he said, no, no, you got Uranus in the first. I said, no, I haven't. He said, yes, you have. Uranus in Leo, you got a Leo ascendant, so it's first house. And I said, well, it doesn't feel like that. He said, come on. He said, you're a computer programmer and an astrologer. How can that be anything other than it's not hidden? How can it be anything other than first house? So he obviously associates astrology with Uranus. I'm not sure that I do. I think Mercury is probably a better fit.
So I am an anecdotal experience contradicting your belief?
Well, I would say I don't have my sample size until you mentioned that had been zero, and now it's one. So I don't think that's a large enough sample size for me to
I agree.
comment.
I agree on that. Now, I would like to change subject and come to the question, what is a proper astrologer? And in my talk with Nick Campion, he mentioned this site, which I didn't know up till then. And there is a reader's guide to a lot of people. And out of this paper, I have some questions. Okay, on page one, astrology. This is completely different to what we did before.
Mm.
This is just one sentence, and you can answer or you can say, doesn't touch me. Next question. Okay, astrology finds itself in a cultural and epistemological cul-de-sac. Would you
I
agree? Would you
No, I
agree that?
don't agree. I I might have agreed 20 years ago when I went to a conference, and at the age of 42, I was the youngest person, pretty much the youngest person there, and thought, well, astrology's dead, isn't it? But I think that astrology grows. I think astrology is like a river. You know, it started off in Babylon with some vague omens. It got formalized by the Greeks. It had things added to it. It's getting things added to it all the time. I mean, asteroids and things like that. I think the whole thing is that to study astrology, you don't have to have a particular religion or a particular mindset, but you probably do have to believe that the universe is alive. And because after all, we're alive and we're simply part of the universe, so how can it not be? And the universe speaks to us in many different languages and in many different ways. And so saying my astrology is the right one and your astrology is the wrong one is a terrible approach. I think that it's always got things to bring, and I think that young people are now getting excited by it. And although a lot of it's very superficial, you might have a million people interested in astrology, but a lot of it is just pop astrology. Well, so what? Tens of thousands of them will go on to study it more seriously. They will be the astrologers of the future. So I think it's got a very bright future. And I think astrology is always growing. It's never died. It's gone into different places and it's waxed and waned, but it's never died. And I don't think it ever will.
On page two, Geoffrey Cornelius has cautioned we should be careful not to overestimate the value of explanatory models in astrology.
Well, I first got into astrology really because I wanted to analyze it, and I thought the reason we haven't been able to prove astrology is we haven't got big enough data sets. And I remember buying the DAV database, the German Astrological Society database. Um, Here we are. I can write some programs to analyze this and come up with signatures. And I think every time you put astrology under the microscope, it kind of disappears because astrology is the big picture. And I'm not particularly excited by astrological research. I have a lot of friends that are astrological researchers, and that's fine. It doesn't particularly excite me. And I don't think that it's a causative effect. I think it is a question of correlation, and maybe it's because the universe has got a fractal structure. I don't know. I don't pretend to know. But I'm not interested in astrological research personally.
A sentence from page three. Broadly speaking, we think divinatory astrology offers the most coherent, though not the only model for horoscopic astrology. What do you think about the divination in the moment of astrology?
Yeah, I think it's a very good point. I think Jeffrey makes the point that in a consultation, there are three entities. There's the client, the astrologer, and the chart, and that the chart suddenly changes everything and the chart speaks, and you need that. I hope it's true because if it isn't, then we might as well give up and go home because AI will eventually be able to do all our readings for us if it's purely mechanical.
Okay, I won't put all the sentences I had prepared to you because we have already covered a lot of things and time is running. Let me see, get rid of this. Now, I have some questions at the end, I believe. Let's see where my questions are. I start with one question. Do you have an opinion on Nechepso and Peto
Sorry, on
Nechepso and Peto Any?
no, I haven't read a huge amount of Hellenistic stuff. That's next. Learning a bit more about Hellenistic and learning a lot more about Vedic is next on my list of things to do at some point, but I don't have a view on it at the moment.
Do you have an opinion on the synchronicity of C.G. Jung and astrology?
Not really. It's something that we do cover on the course, looking at Jung and synchronicity, but I wouldn't say that I'm uh, well versed enough in psychological astrology or um, uh, Jungian analysis to really have an opinion on it.
Okay, coming to this, what you mentioned with Robert Hand, you have a strong opinion on whole sign houses because you don't like them, right?
I, for me, I've got Saturn and Jupiter in Capricorn, and my Saturn is fifth house, using pretty much every house system. But with whole sign, everything changes because my ascendant is 29 degrees of Leo. So, of course, pretty much every house changes.
Yes, yes.
Now, Saturn in the fifth house really resonates with me because when I was a kid, I was an only child. I was very geeky. I used to read, I'd spend all my time in the library or in museums. I was obsessed with old languages, Egyptian hieroglyphics. I remember being given an adult ticket in the library when I was 10 because the librarian felt sorry for me, which meant I could read all these really obscure books. And all my friends thought, oh, poor Chris, he's not having any fun. They were all playing football and climbing trees, and I was stuck in a library somewhere. I was having tremendous fun, but it was very Saturnian fun, and that feels like Saturn in the fifth to me, not Saturn in the sixth.
So again, you are an anecdote against whole sign houses.
I'm
In my
I'm a sample
case,
size of one again, yes.
and in I'm a sample of one because in my case, you can look up my nativities on my homepage on this special site. I have a stellium with Moon, with Saturn, Moon, and Mars, and in Placidus in the ninth house enclosed, and in the whole sign house it's the 10th. And I'm with the same experience you have, it feels much better in the 10th. So we are two samples of one. So that's two 1 to 1 in this discussion.
I wouldn't reject whole sign out of hand, and I know a lot of people that use it very effectively. And of course, if I'm doing perfections, I'm just doing the simple perfections, and I am using whole sign for perfections.
Yes,
So,
me too. I think it's unbelievable the different if you use a quadrant house system for perfection, that doesn't feel right.
yeah.
What are the today's focuses of yourself? What are you doing in astrology theoretically or practically? What's your focus? What's your interest in 2025?
I'm passionate about teaching and giving talks. It's why I give a lot of talks to local groups and getting ideas out there and just showing uh, the techniques that I really enjoy using, medieval ones, and show how they can actually adapt to the modern world, how they can be used, and how they can be made accessible. I think there are a lot of I'm more of a techniques person than a person, which is why I think I enjoy teaching and giving courses more than I do giving readings. I'm always nervous giving readings that I'm going to make self-fulfilling prophecies. You know, if I tell somebody that oh, that I don't like the look of that Saturn and Pluto squaring this, that, and the other, they might suddenly have a bad time, and they weren't going to have a bad time, but because I've told them they might or implied that they might, it might manifest. So I'm happier teaching than I am working with clients, to be honest.
Did we miss an important subject we could talk about now?
I don't think so. I think you've been extremely thorough and covered everything.
Okay. So you did like the way we did approach your
Absolutely, yes, yes. No,
okay.
I'm very impressed. And I've seen some of your other talks as well. So yes, I do like the approach.
Okay, so for the viewers and for myself, many thanks to Dr. Chris Mitchell. And don't forget to buy his book because it's intriguing to learn aurora in a way you won't find anywhere else. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And thank you very much, Volker, for giving me the opportunity for
No, no.
talking about this.
I
Thank you.
enjoyed talking with you because it was the project is called Astrologies in Astrology, and this fits perfectly because it's the first astrology in England. So thanks for by the viewers through me and myself. Thanks very much for doing this, taking the time, and I will stop the recording.